Hi, my name is Mark Brown with PonyBoyPopArt. Today we're going to be going over Commissioner James Gordon. This is a model by David Eastman and is available on his Patreon page. Today we're going to be going over how I printed it out, painted it, and made it look like this. Extra bonus for extra credit is the glass lenses that were made on there. I've got those models printed out and available on my page as well. So I hope you follow along, I hope you enjoy, and regardless, I hope you have fun. Thanks a lot. This build, print, and paint is going to go over David Eastman's Commissioner Gordon model. This is usually printed in two pieces. I've actually got it in, 4 or 5 here, but I'll explain that in a minute. This was printed out primarily in silver, and that is Silk Silver, and I'm pretty happy with how really especially the gunmetal look of this came out. But, of course, most models that we do here, you're not really going to see the raw material too much at all. This is one of those where the print did not go perfectly, and you can see very clearly here that's not the way it's supposed to be. I'd slowed down the print when it got to the eyeglasses just because I wanted to be careful on the overhang, and I slowed it down enough and must have had a problem with my cooling fan because I ended up getting a clog, so I had to cancel the print. And this happens with a lot of people, and you feel, oh, I've just lost a 2-day print or whatever. In this case, I wanted to show that no, you didn't lose it. So what I did is measured how high this was, went into Cura, took the model, scaled it how I had it, which is, I believe, 115%. You'll see in the settings in the title here. And then pushed it down the height of the model. It wasn't exact because, of course, I have some calibration issues where it's not quite the same as what we had on here or in the Cura model. But using the landmarks of where I was on the hairline, on the glasses, I was able to figure out where I needed to position it exactly and then printed out the rest. It's not absolutely perfect, and that's okay. And as a matter of fact, I decided, you know what? We're going to include this in the video this time being this print, because I want you to go ahead and see that you don't have to be perfect, you can still have it look awesome. So I've got the base, the bust, which is supposed to be one piece, but in this case is 2. And then I also did a model, which is going to be linked in the comments below, for the eyeglass lenses, and they're going to go there and here. And I've printed those out on my resin printer using clear resin, just because I wanted to give that little extra finesse. And once they're printed and cured, I hit them with a high gloss enamel just to kind of give that glass feel to them. So I'm just going to set those aside here, and again, the link for those models will be in the comments. They are to scale, 1:1 for the Commissioner, so whatever you scale him, scale these, and you should be set. So we're going to get to it. The first thing that I need to do is evaluate just how much issues we've got. I do see that we're not 100% perfectly aligned here, but pretty close. So I think I'm going to go ahead and super glue him in place as far as the top and bottom. There's some issues down here as far as, I think that I had some under extrusion at the beginning. Oh, yep. And so I think we'll just hit that with a little bit of, well, you know what, we'll super glue it first, and then I think we will bring out the modeling paste really quick on that. So I'm going to take a pause, we'll get things set, and then we'll come back. All right, we've got everything cleaned up pretty well here. We'll still have to be doing some sanding and whatnot, but I think it's got time to get these assembled, so I'm just grabbing some plain old Gorilla super glue, and I'm going to get just, Didn't want that much. This is coming out quick. Alright, so, and we've got some glue on there. Time to line this up as best as we can. Let's see how this side's doing. Oh, yep. Okay. Pretty close. So I'm gonna have to fill in a little gap at his nose here. Fill in that little bit of frame on his glasses. And of course, sand some of this down. But overall, that's gonna line up nice. So we're gonna call that good. I know he still looks a little rough, especially if you look up close. So right now, don't look close. And we're gonna wait for that to dry, and we will continue on getting this prepped up. So I'm gonna say this pretty much every video. If you don't have some of this Liquitex modeling paste, you should go out and get some right now. And come back and finish this video when you don't. Sorry. When this stuff I found out from my wife, and she used it for some of her art classes, and what I ended up using it for was to do things like this, really fixing issues with our 3D prints. I'm going to show one example. This fairy girl here had a serious under extrusion issue. I thought I was just going to completely throw the model away, or the print away. I mean, you know, the model's fine. Looked a lot like this, except to the point that this was very brittle, and I could just squeeze and my finger would go right through it. Obviously, you can see that's not the case here. If you listen a little bit, you can hear some of the underlying brittleness in that. This side, if you look very closely, you can see the under extrusion pattern in there. But what I did is took this modeling paste and then simply put a lot of it onto the model, especially where it had under extruded. And then just painted it into those cracks. Just like I would a thick paint. And as I'm painting it in, you can see it's filling in the cracks there. And I'm going to take some over here, bring it around, fill in some of these, especially this really troublesome one down at the bottom. I'll go ahead and get a little more of this paste here. Just kind of gloop it on at the moment. Oh, yep, we've got it all around the back here. So I won't bore you with all of that, but I will show you what I'm doing here on the front. Is once I've got that painted in, and especially most of the material off of my brush, mostly because I don't want to waste it. Then what I'm going to do is wet my brush down with just a little water, and then paint back over this some more. And you'll notice it's going to smooth out, fill in those gaps even better. I'm just going to keep repeating that, getting some of the excess off of my brush when I do the rinse, and then getting a little of the moisture into the paste here and helping it fill in. If you get a little bit into a spot where you don't want it, just paint it really heavily with water and wipe it out. Most of it is going to come out. It's going to be a little bit that's going to stay in the ridge lines most likely. You might be able to keep watering it down and painting it out. You should be able to. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing is continuing this around the bottom and getting that filled in pretty well, mostly just so that it's solid for our primer, and then at that point we won't see this at all. So I'm going to keep doing that, and you are not going to see any difference at all other than I'm magically further along because of editing. Woohoo! One thing you might notice while you're putting this stuff on, that it's getting a little thick. It's getting a little too much like paste. Honestly, just add a little bit of water and boom, it immediately thins right out and becomes kind of like paint. Just a thick paint. Once you have it looking the way you want, go over it a little bit with a little more wet brush and then wipe off. And you should be able to wipe off all the excess moisture, which is carrying along with it some of that. So this is not going to make it perfect, but it is going to make it a lot stronger and a lot more solid, and then we should be able to just prime over this and sand out the little bits left. So I think we're going to let that dry and come back to it. Oh, do take a moment. Thoroughly clean out your brush. You don't want any of this modeling paste stuck over and gluing up your bristles. I hate it when that happens. Now we're ready. So I just wanted to take a minute and show you what I've been doing. I've got some 100 grit sandpaper here, and I'm just wanting to now smooth out the areas that we had filled in with our modeling paste there, and I'm going to smooth that out over here. You can see already the difference that just literally just about 2 minutes of sanding with the 100 grit did to already start smoothing this out. Of course, this is going to, when I do this, going to take off that finish that we had on here. I did want to note, a lot of people will take a print like this and basically just call it good once they've got the filament of choice, and that's where I used to be before I met my buddy Joe Brancic over at Likeness 3D. Shout out to you, Joe. And he really pointed out that it doesn't matter what filament you print it out in, you're going to paint it however you want. So sometimes I will now choose to use a filament and then leave certain areas of that filament. Like I've got Dr. Doom printed in this, and I will probably leave the metal of his face in this raw silver here and do very little to that. But something like Commissioner Gordon really was just, I had this filament loaded and I had a fair amount of it at the time, so I went ahead and used it. Nothing against people that do want to stop there. As a matter of fact, my mom was over this weekend checking out the workshop and my prints, and when she saw Commissioner Gordon, she asked if I was leaving him, you know, just in the silver. So again, you know, nothing against that, but if you're watching this video, the reason you're watching it is to know how to make it actually look like Commissioner Gordon, and that's what we're going to be trying to do. So at that point, I'm going to keep sanding off on here and here, and most of the layer lines on the jacket are very smooth, so I don't think I'm going to bother with anything other than what I've filled in, except up on his face, especially because it had started to have a jam. You can really start to see some lines where I think it was starting to have extrusion issues. And then of course we're going to have to fill in the cut line here and make that disappear. But beyond that, we're just going to keep on going. So I'm going to do some sanding with the 100 grit, and then I'll check back in with you and show you where I'm at. All right, it's been about maybe 5 minutes, maybe 7 of sanding down this, and it's not perfect by any stretch, but I did want to take a moment and just show where it's at. So I've just got some pure water here, and I'm going to wipe all of the dust off there. So, still got some sanding to go, but just wanted to show you this is where we're at with just, again, about 5, maybe 7 minutes of sanding with the 100 grit. So I'm going to do just a little bit more and smooth out some of this, but honestly, yeah, the front's getting still a little rough, and so is that side, but it's not too bad, especially for cloth and leather, so I think we'll be okay. So I'll keep going and check back again. I want to take a minute now and fix that hairline and crack around his head. And again, this is something that you're going to run into all the time of print failing one way or another. And you've got that decision point. Do I throw it in the bin, or do I plug along and see if I can fix it? And I've gotten to the point where I almost see it a little more of a challenge. Oh, let me see if I can fix it. Maybe I can't. Maybe I'm still going to throw it. But if it's worth saving, why not? And so, just taking again our Liquitex modeling paste. I sometimes call it modeling putty, and I get the words mixed up, so I apologize. All I'm doing is using my paintbrush to basically paint this on, and a little feathering back and forth right at that seam line to try and make the seam disappear. And, oh, sorry. One thing about this is we definitely don't want to just blanketly put it everywhere, because what'll happen is you'll see that you've lost your entire crease here in his hair and that type of thing. Hello, little fly. You gotta go, buddy. Oh, you gotta go. All right. I swear, after I saved your life, if you bite me, I will fucking kill you. Alright. So, just again, taking this and painting it back and forth here, and kind of hitting around the crease lines. Now I'm going to dip my brush in just a little bit of water here. Sorry. And then paint back over some of these areas where it got a little thick. And kind of spread that back out. At times you end up spreading that right back off of where you were trying to fill in, so then you have to get a little more precise. So this side, still got a little bit of work to do on that, I think. We'll find out once we prime it. Now, let's see if we can fix up his face here. So we've got a little bridge across his nose issue. And just gloop for the moment into the crevice in the eyes. And what I'm really trying to do is kind of pack it into that crease that I've got there where the parts didn't quite align. And it glued together, but not perfectly. And that's going to happen with this. Again, I'm going to take a little water and then paint it in there and really more paint the paste off. So get a little water, wipe it over that, and what you've got, wipe it back off on your paper towel. A little fresh water, come in a new spot, wipe her down, and then dry it off. Like here, it's already very watery now, so I don't need to refresh. Just need to pick up that watery paste off of there and take it away with a brush. Now, some of you may have noticed, whoa, what about this? You can go right through there. Yep, that is not going to be able to be handled with this. That is going to require our two-part modeling compound. And we will get to that in a bit. But not right yet. And again, you know, some people would have looked at this and said, psh, screw that, reprint. The problem is, you can't be guaranteed that the reprint was going to do any better than this one did. Hopefully you made whatever tweaks to the slicer that you needed to, or changed orientation, or updated your supports. But you know, when the print itself takes 1 to 2 days to print, and then you find out at the end of it that it failed, you're really not that keen to invest another 2 days to see if you can get it to fail again. Or maybe you'll get lucky and this time it worked. Or another 100 to 200 grams of filament because the time and the filament both add up. And again, this is a challenge. Can I make Commissioner Gordon look like he did not have a print fail and is just plain old Commissioner Gordon? I'm feeling confident. Alright, at this point I want to take it over and prime it up and actually see what we're really looking at. You know, obviously it looks rough right now, but let's take a look at it with some primer and see how that goes. As always, we've got the Rustoleum 2-in-1 filler and sandable primer. This is amazing stuff, and it is just an absolute must-have for anyone that is finishing 3D prints. So I'm going to just start applying the layer all over it. I know the purists out there, close your eyes. Look at that. Maybe a few under extrusion areas that we still need to finish. But from the front, the seam is gone. Glasses look pretty decent. Alright, I want you to go back, take a pause, look where you are in the video. Now go back and look at the piece or pieces that we had when we were first had this come off the printer. Doesn't even seem like the same thing, does it? You were getting ready to throw that thing away. Look at this. It's Commissioner Gordon starting to stare at us already. So we're going to take about 15, maybe 20 minutes, let this dry, and then we can start doing more work. And truthfully, I think I'm going to call it a night tonight and pick this up tomorrow. So this is where Jim sits at this point. We've still got some seam line around here we're going to take care of, and clearly a seam on his face, and we've still got some issues down here at the bottom, but definitely improved, and you know, he's not looking bad for himself. So what I'm going to do is start sanding on this now, and just trying to get this a little smoother and get it more clear of where exactly we need to take care of. So I'm going to grab some more 100 grit paper and just sand on this for a couple of minutes, and I'll be right back. So it's been about maybe 7 or 10 minutes that I've been sanding. I've just been focusing on this side. I wanted to be able to give you a comparison. If you notice the smoothness that I've got over here on the lapel and on his jacket as versus very rough. You can even just hear the... So definitely improvement there, and this has got to go, but I definitely also wanted to show you this. Compare the seam line up here now, which I've sanded for a couple of minutes there, And as soon as you start to rotate, you can see where I've not sanded yet, and over here where I haven't sanded yet. So I'm thinking that once I get a little more sanding done on here and carry that around, we'll do another coat of primer, and it's very possible that other than this front part, which we'll still be getting to, you won't be able to tell that Jim's head was claved in two when we first started. So that's the point, is to hopefully by the end of this have a completely clean looking model that you would never know we had a complete print fail during the middle of it. And that's one of the tips I wanted to be able to share with you today. So we're going to keep going, and I will keep sanding. Be back with you in a few. So it's been about another 15, maybe 20 more minutes of sanding, and at this point I've gotten most of the little extra goobers that had accumulated around his glasses on the reprint of his head. Got those cleaned off. I've got almost all of the ridge line there removed, and most of the issues down here are minimized. What we're going to do now is spray it one more time with our filler primer and see what's left to deal with at that point. At this point I've sanded some more, probably another 20 minutes here, and get a little bit of a ridge line still on the back, but otherwise this part is now not even noticeable. This side barely noticeable. I think with a little paint it would disappear. I'll probably sand it a little bit more. But we do still have the seam line in here. I thought this was going to be bad enough that we were going to have to use 2-part compound, but I think we're still going to be able to use just the Liquitex. So I'm going to take some more of the Liquitex modeling paste and just paint it inside into the groove lines here and see if we can get that painted up. All right, and now that I've got the Liquitex in place, I'm gonna, as usual, just take a wet paintbrush and kind of brush some of the excess off of there, wiping it off as I go. I'm going to be trying to stay focused of only where I don't want any of the white that I've got on there to actually still show through. Okay. All right, I've decided at this point, we could continue to try and buff and polish out every little bump and line, but I really want to start making some progress on this and being able to see some progress. So the way that I usually do that is to find the piece that has the most visual space and attack it first, just so I can start to actually get a feel that I'm making some headway. So what I've done is grab some Burnt Umber water-based oil. Usually we would be going with acrylic for our initial layer, but actually I've got a specific technique in mind, so I'm just going to give that a try first, and that is to take some water-based oil of Burnt Umber and lightly lay it on directly onto the primer and then spread it out from there. And I think already you can see why I'm choosing to do this. Makes for just a very nice looking leather coat. Don't need it to be too heavy. It's almost like dry brushing, but just a little bit more than that, because the primer will absorb some of that right off the bat. But it's also a little bit drier than a standard acrylic painting. If it is too wet, like I've done here, kind of purposely, just try to immediately bring it down to other areas and just keep pulling that out and then smooth it around. So I'm going to keep doing this on the rest of his leather jacket, and I will check back with you in a few minutes. Just wanted to take a quick pause. This is how he's looking on the back so far here, and I think you'll agree, it's starting to look like a leather jacket. So I'm just going to keep going, but I wanted you to see where we're at. And that's what I call a leather jacket. So at this point I'm just going to clean the, actually I'm not going to clean the bottom, or clean this. I'm going to paint the bottom, because why not? I've already got the brown out. If we look at this from the back, this looks awesome. We definitely don't want to see a bunch of gray under it. So I'm going to go ahead and use the rest of my burnt umber here to just give the whole bottom a once over. All right, now the bottom is set. So if we see it at an angle, that primer doesn't just jump out at us and it just disappears and becomes like he's got more of his leather jacket there. So now that we've got basically a whole lot of this painted up, I'm going to go take it over and mat it down. Matter of fact, I'm just going to touch a few areas that dried up a little more than I want them to. I want them to still have that deeper look. I don't know if I just grabbed it a little or if it's just from drying. All right. Now, I'm going to take this over, spray down with some matte enamel. So because I've sprayed the bottom, I've got him laying down on his face at the moment. I made sure that only the tips of his collar are touching the base there. And I'm going to spray him down. Got some Rustoleum matte enamel here. While Rustoleum does not pay me, I wish they would, because I go through their stuff like mad. I could use some stock in them at this point. So a couple of shakes, and basically just going to give this whole thing a nice light coat and wait for about 10-15 minutes for it to dry, and then we will spin it around and coat the rest of it. Basically, I just want to make sure that everything that I've painted here gets a nice layer of enamel, and then we can go over and touch it up after that. While Jim is getting his first coat of matte enamel, I figured I would take this base that I'd found and utilize it, start getting it going. So the first thing I want to do is coat it up with our handy dandy Rustoleum 2-in-1 filler and Sandable primer. And really the thing about this is just getting the wood coated over, getting it so it'll take a coat of paint and have a nice flat finish for us. So I'm just gonna get this lightly coated up and then hit the edges especially. And give that a few minutes to dry. The plaque is covered with primer and drying. Jim has been moved back over to our paint station, but before I come back to him, I wanted to take a look at this base itself. I do like the gunmetal look that this has got, knowing that this is supposed to be part of a gun. So what I'm going to do is just protect it as it is using, you guessed it, Rustoleum. This time we're going to go with the Satin Clear Enamel. And the reason is I really want to maintain some of the sheen, that feel of metal that this already has. So basically just going to give a little bit of a once over with this whole piece with the satin enamel. And we'll let that dry. All right, the next thing I want to do is paint up Jim's shirt. I really want something kind of a light khaki to offset the leather here. I don't want so light as this Buttermilk, but so again, for that khaki concept, I'm going to just take a little bit of our honey brown here, honey brown, and some of the light Buttermilk, and get them mixed up together over here. And just be playing with this until I get just the right color. Actually, I think that's pretty close. Again, wanted to take a pause, show you this is where we're at, and we'll share there's a couple of times that I have overpainted on his shirt, got it on some of the shirt color on his jacket. Not really worried about that right now, because when we get back to the aging and weathering stage later on, we'll always have time to just overpaint that again with the Burnt Umber and make it just disappear again. But for now, it's starting to come along. I'm liking it. So one thing you'll notice is that on his shirt, you can actually see some of the layer lines showing through a little bit. And as I noted before, I was really okay with that. I think I did. I've noted a couple of times on different videos. In this case, I was okay because it really gives texture to his shirt, really gives that the feel of this really being cloth and of his leather really being leather. Seeing the wrinkles and the lines in there just kind of helps give it a feel of real material. Obviously, we don't want that so much on his face, and we're going to have to try and minimize that through paint at this point after we did some of the sanding. But overall, again, still looking pretty good. So at this point, I am going to switch back to my oil brush and add the leather back onto his gun holder there, his holster, or his shoulder harness, whatever you want to call it. Just gonna grab a little bit of that brown or burnt umber and smear down this. Yep, I'm gonna take a little different. All right. At this point, I want to give him a nice solid brown tie. So I might get some actual dark brown paint here. And just get that painted in there real quick. So that's not quite dark enough for my taste on his tie, so I'm just going to add a little bit of black to this and see if we can get a darker shade that's not at all like his coat, but different enough. Ooh, not quite that dark, guys. Maybe that dark. Yeah, it's not quite that dark. Okay. I like his shirt. I like the leather on his holster. I like his tie. I believe it's time to take him over and spray him with matte enamel. All right, while Jim is over drying on this matte enamel, I'm going to do another little step on the space here. I want these to be really the brass that they should look. And I was looking, I thought that I had something that was going to be perfect for that. I don't quite, so what I'm just going to go with is some antique gold rub and buff. And then we're going to hit that, I think, with some burnt umber afterwards to just get rid of a little of the brightness and hopefully dim it down a little from being super gold. And with rub and buff, try to wear gloves because otherwise you will get gold all over your fingers and then you end up getting on your print. So, I just want to take and rub a little of this on the parts that it's supposed to be on. Try not to get it on the parts that it's not. And then buff it in. And actually looking at this may end up being just fine on its own. Maybe a little bit more rub and buff on there, but alrighty. That looks kind of like it was supposed to. So I'm going to go ahead and take this over and satin enamel it again, and then I'll just age up these bolts a little bit, and I think that's going to look really well. All right, the next thing I want to get to on Jim here is his skin. Let's we've got some just base flush tone here, nothing fancy, and I'm just going to grab a little bit of this and start painting his skin. Alright, now that we've got a base layer of flush coat on him, we are ready to if you guessed spray him with matte enamel, you're right. Score yourself a point. So since we're still waiting for the satin enamel to dry on the base itself, and we've got a matte enamel drying on Jim, I figured we would come over to the plaque that we're going to be using for the mount for his base. And I've got some, can you guess the brand? Yep, Rustoleum. And this time it's a metallic silver, or not silver, metallic gold. Hey, buddy. I had to step away for a moment, and actually this is dry at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and spray it down with matte enamel as well. Now that our satin enamel's had a chance to dry, I'm going to take some ivory black water-based oil and really just coat the entire bullet casing with that. Really want to make sure it gets down into the grooves and into the letters. Don't worry about there being too much. We're going to come back to that and wipe it off. Alright, now that we've got it deep into the crevices there, just going to take some paper towel, do a light wipe on these. And we've got the lettering and the grooves actually being filled in now. I'm just going to go and add a little back here just for some grunging up. I think that looks pretty good. So we're going to take this over and put satin on it. Alright, I figure we might as well take this time and get these pieces put together, because why not? We're at a good enough point for that, so let's just do it. So I'm going to grab my Gorilla Glue 5-minute epoxy. This dries clear, and just a nice piece of plastic that I can put some of this epoxy into. Squirts out as 2 parts. We're going to mix it really well and then just kind of slather it on, so to speak. Alright, now mix this stuff together. And then, sorry you couldn't see that, just taking a little piece of plastic, actually the case that it came in, mixed the two parts of the epoxy together, scooping it onto the stick, and then just going to kind of really slather it onto the bottom of our base here. So just like with the rub and buff, I actually do advise you wear gloves while dealing with this stuff. I just kind of got excited about putting this together and didn't think of it. So now that I've got a fair bit of this epoxy slathered over the bottom of our base, I'm going to take it and line it up where I want. Set it down, give it a little bit of squish, and give this 5 minutes, come back, and it should be a fully mountable piece, so you can pick up right by the tip here and it'll lift this whole piece of wood up. And that's exactly what we need, because then once we're done, we'll be gluing these two pieces together and it will be one whole unit. But that is later. So one more thing I want to do before before I forget about it, is this hole right here. I believe it's obviously it's meant to represent an empty cartridge or an empty chamber, but with this gold plaque, it's really kind of showing as a big gold circle as versus an empty chamber. So what I'm going to do is just grab a little acrylic black, and I'm going to paint that chamber in so that it's clearly an empty socket, so to speak, as versus something bright and flashy. So the next thing we're going to do is work on Jim's hair. There's a couple of different ages of Jim, so to speak, and I'm going to go with the later years where his hair is kind of turned gray. So what I'm going to do is actually play up on the primer here, and just going to take a little bit of black oil and do a dry brushing technique. So I'm just going to get a little bit on, just like we did with the leather on here with the Burnt Umber, and just going to really push that into the crevices. And basically what I'm wanting is hair is never a single color. There's always different levels and variations, and so what I'm wanting is to get some black into those deep bits, and then I'm going to wipe that off, and then we're going to come back over and add white highlights to some of the other bits, and hopefully we'll get a nice feel of gray. So I'm going to just pause there, and now take and wipe off a lot of that. And see how we're looking. And if you notice, a lot of that has now went and grayed back out, but it's left a lot of the dark in the creases. I'm going to just keep going on that, and come back with you in just a few minutes. All right, and that's already given some nice depth to his hair. I've still got this seam line. I was really hoping that that would have minimized by now, so we're gonna have to do a little bit more work on that. But overall, I'd say it's starting to look really well. So I've decided, since this line is still here, I'm gonna just take a little bit of a detail brush, grab some of this black oil, and just kind of paint over some of the bits that are really jumping out at me. And at that point, if they are more just faded of black here, hopefully they will be blended in enough that I can make it all but disappear with using paint. So at this point, I'm really liking the multiple layers of depth of color in his hair. We've got the gray, we've even got what looks like white, even though I've not done any white here, up in here, just because it's so light gray. And but really starting to look like hair. And so what I'm going to do now is take a detail brush and some titanium white oil, and I'm just going to take bits and highlight some areas and hopefully really help give the feel of really grayed and green hair in here. So I'm going to start with just what I know of graying hair. You know, they kind of have a lot of highlights on the top, especially ones that you're going to be able to see up here. It's kind of blotchy now. I'm going to spread this out and thin it around, but just kind of want to keep to the surfaces. Anytime I make an actual dot accidentally, I'm just spreading it out into a line then. And I have a lot of them hitting in at the roots. And again, I'm just going to spread those out. If you have reference images, of course, go to them, but truthfully, I'm just going from what I can think of people that I imagine with gray hair, because I'm getting older. I know some. One thing that I'm going to be using the white for is to continue to help. If you remember way back when, this dude used to have his head claved in two, and you can still see a little bit of that ridge line, especially here where I just must not have had it perfectly sized or perfectly lined up, because there's definitely some gaps there. But my hope is with enough little blending between the black and the white that it's actually going to just minimize to the point that your eye just doesn't see it, and we can forget that it ever happened. You know what I mean? So let's just do some of that now. Oh, a little heavy there. So where I went heavy, I'm just going to come back over and grab some paint back off and redistribute it somewhere else. One thing I want to note is if I've got too thick of a spot, usually I would say, just wipe it off with paper towel. But the purpose that I'm trying to do right here is highlight the tips and the tops of his hair. So really going and hitting the crests more than anything, and leaving a lot of dark in the depths to help give that feeling of multiple levels and shading and all that whatnot. So I really don't want to wipe it off with a paper towel, or it really will wipe it off, especially the highlights where I've been trying to hit. So instead, if it's too strong, just take your, wipe your brush off and then go over that spot again and pick up the paint from there with your brush and then reapply it somewhere else. It gives the same feeling, but also just helps blend it in a lot more, which in this case is really what you're looking for. So I ended up painting a little bit this off camera, and what I've done is added some more of the white in there, just really continued on that a lot and bringing out those highlights whenever I could to try and give a lot of depth to the hair color there. And at that point also trying to focus on the crease line and get the some of those hid as much as possible by trying to play up either the white or the black, and really keep your eye more focusing on the differences of the hair colors versus the fact that he has got a line through his head. I also took the time while I was there, went over all of his mustache and his eyebrows with black oil, and then turned around and went back over most of them with white oil and the titanium white. And at that point it gives, again, that multiple shading when there's areas where I didn't hit with the white and did hit with the black, and just gives kind of, again, a nice depth of feel. So I've sprayed this down with matte enamel, and I think we're going to be ready to do some work on his skin tones and then some touch-ups, and we'll be able to start wrapping him up. Alright, so we're going to jump around a little bit. I noticed that I'd had a little bit of gray from and white from painting his hair get over onto his skin there, so I've just done a slight touch with some more of our flesh to get that coated back over, and then sprayed it down with matte enamel just to lock that back in. I'm seeing a little bit of a sheen, and knowing that this is matte enamel, then that tells me that it's still a little wet and tacky, so I really don't want to do anything up in that area until it dries, but I do want to make some progress on the model overall. So what I think I'm going to do is switch back to our Burnt Umber oil, and the water-based oil of Burnt Umber, and I'm just going to take and just lightly grab some of that and go into the creases on his shirt, weather that in a little bit up in here, and basically just add some depth and age to his overall appearance here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of Burnt Umber, get most of it back off of the brush, and then just kind of go into the crease lines. And this is again one of those where if you get too much, you want to smooth it out and just bring it over to other places. With the point is we just want to add some kind of like sweat lines and grime to his shirt. So we know Jim, he is out running around and he's clearly not in the best shape, so I've switched brushes. This brush here was good for just light painting, but I forgot that that is not really the best for the weathering. We really want to be able to kind of rub this in and literally grime it in. And this one's got shorter bristles and a little stiffer, so they fit more of a kind of a rubbing something in as versus brushing it on. Again, I'm wanting to get most of that off, and then I'm going to just come down and give some aging to there's some shadows really to the side of his tie. One of the things I want to point out is there were a couple of times that I had some serious overpaint from the brown of his tie onto his shirt, and yeah, I was like, okay, I really should pull out and remix the shirt colors so that I can touch those back up. But in looking at it, I'm like, you know what, the most places that you're going to get sweat stains are right on your gut, and especially where your shirt's touching your gut, and probably gonna get some food stains and whatnot in there. So instead of trying to overpaint it back, the shirt color, why don't we just emphasize it and add some more shadow into behind his tie and emphasize the staining and that type of thing on his shirt. So now that we've done that, the shirt looks pretty natural, and we don't see that there was a big bunch of brown stains there. At the same time, there were a couple of times that when I was painting the shirt, I had gotten onto the back of his tie, right down into that ridge line. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that from the angle. And so I took this small paintbrush and added some burnt umber and just went back over that. And now it's all blending in very nicely together. I'm going to do a little bit more in the creases here. So again, I'm just going to take a little burnt umber on the small brush and just kind of pack it in there a little bit. I don't care that I'm getting it a little thick. And then I'm going to take this brush and just kind of smear it out a little bit. So now there's not as hard of a line. It helps emphasize the shadows. And the big thing you don't want is to look in there and see the brighter color of the shirt standing out, like say on the leather or anything like that. So what you'd rather do is cover that up and shadow it out, and at that point it just looks more natural. I'm going to go back and do the same thing over on this side here. I think that's looking pretty good. All right, let's see what else we can do here. All right, in looking at Jim here, we've got the various pieces of him. His coat. I believe his coat is just dandy all around. We've got his shirt. I believe his shirt is done at this point, with the only exception that I want to touch a little bit on his buttons there and light them up just to be clear that they are those buttons. This, I'm thinking, really should be a brass ring for a buckle. So maybe just brass that up a little bit, or copper. The biggest things we have left really is his face. His face and his neck, and then finishing off his glasses. So I think at this point what I want to do is go ahead and start adding some color to his face. If you remember, we painted him with just a standard flesh tone. But what we want to do now is add some realism to the color. And the way that we're going to do that is what I refer to as the Sideshow method. And it's because I've seen, if you've not watched already, the Sideshow How to Paint Superman and Sideshow How to Paint Harley Quinn. Definitely check them out. They are amazing videos. But what they walk you through is what I'm about to walk you through right now, of taking a yellow, and this is acrylic cadmium yellow, blue, again acrylic, just a straight blue, and red. And what we're going to do is wash over all of the parts that are skin with first the yellow, then the blue, and then the red. And what that's going to do is give him a far more realistic skin tones, much like what we see here in Batgirl. She was used the same method, and I'm hoping to get close to the same type of look with him. So I'm going to take cad yellow here, just a little bit, and a tight brush because I really want to have some good control over what's going on in Jim here. And want to really thin this out a lot. So I'm hoping that you can see this here, just mixing in a lot of water, so this becomes just pretty soupy. All right, that looks pretty thin. Anywhere there's skin, we want to paint. Indeed, making him look like he's all yellow. Anywhere there's skin. Be careful when you're grabbing some not to grab too thick of the acrylic. We do want this to be a wash, not a paint. Remember, even under the eyes, so get in there under the glasses. Be sure to get his ears. And just really want to rub this in good here. Just to make sure I've covered everything. Now for the bit that seems weird, especially if you've already done this type of thing of cleaning off a mistake, what we're going to do is just take some paper towel, start blotting it back off. Anywhere that you see a hard yellow, blot it and take it back off. You may have to blot several times, it's okay. Do not wipe, just blot. So the concept here is you didn't get all of the yellow back off. You got some of the yellow back off. But what happened is I still got to get in his ears, is it added a yellow hue or a shade to him. And that's kind of that, really what happens to your skin. It's kind of tanned. Now, I'm going to take some of this where it was really thick and still not coming out, and just use my paintbrush to remove it. So it's like in his ear hole. Again, all I'm doing is wetting my paintbrush down so that it's clean and just wet, mildly wet, and then going back over that area to either spread out or just lift off the yellow paint that was there. Awesome. And now what we're going to do is take a little bit of blue paint. Now I could spray this down with matte enamel, and really I probably should, but this method seemed to work okay with not doing that and just coating over. Do want that to dry, so I'm going to let it dry up a little bit while I mix up my blue here. Alright, so now I've got some blue, again, very watered down, and again, just going to go over and paint over them. And once again, take a clean piece of paper towel and then start blotting that dry. And we'll let that coat dry. He is definitely taking on more of a realistic hue to his skin. I like that. So while that's doing that and drying, we are going to take some primary red. Once again, repeat with the red. And then, just like before, blot off with some clean paper towel. All right, so learning all the time, as they say. As you heard me say, I really probably should spray this down with matte enamel. Yeah, I really should have. I should have taken the time, sprayed down with that matte enamel between the yellow, the blue, and the red. Because I do like some of the things. I mean, like there's some natural veining that just happened up on his forehead here, and a lot of that looks really good. But there's some parts in his cheeks here where I ended up, when I was blotting, I must have smeared, and it looks like some of the colors just kind of went together and turned his cheeks kind of a gray, and I'm not really happy with that. Had I sprayed it with matte enamel, I think that there would have been less bleeding together of that. So in the future, and for all of you, learn from my mistakes, definitely do the spray of the matte enamel, be patient, wait the 15 minutes per coat, and then go ahead and do your blotting and all that again at that point. What I'm going to do in the meantime is just take a little bit more of our flesh, thin it out, and just kind of dot over some of the areas of his cheek that I wasn't really happy with. So as I noted before, I really would like to get this to feel like it's a little bit of a brass ring, so let's go ahead and do that right now. All right. It took a lot less paint than I thought. Now let's take just a small bit of titanium white. Matter of fact, I won't even get any out. I'll just dip right off the tip there. And very carefully hit the buttons on the shirt. Alright, so let's give this guy a once over here. Once again, jacket, done. Shirt, rockin'. Tie, awesome. Holster, done. Buttons on his shirt, good. Flesh, I think just about there. Maybe a few little touch-ups, but we'll come back to that. Hair, good. Eyes and glasses, I think that's what we got left. And we're gonna have to call this guy completed piece. So, we're gonna take a pause there. So as we said, next thing I wanted to do is get his eyes and his glasses, and then he's pretty well done. So I'm going to take just a little bit of white, titanium white oil. Get just a bit of it on my brush. The reason I do the oil is I found that the white acrylic is just too intense of a white, as versus the white oil for the whites of the eyes. That's done. So the next thing is, looked him up because I wasn't sure. Commissioner James Gordon has blue eyes. So again, just a dot of this blue. Even that was way more than I needed. And what we're going to do is, I chose the concave eyes from Mr. Eastman's models because if he's going to take the time to actually design out where the pupils should be, I'm going to make the most of that. So what I've gotten in the habit of doing is filling in the pupil and then just dragging out a little bit on the sides to help give the feel of that iris coming out and expanding out from there. There we go. Now I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to get a little bit of black acrylic and just give him an actual pupil on both eyes. This is another one of those where I don't even really need to go into the paint. I'm just going to grab right off the cap. For his right eye, I'm switching to an even smaller brush because he is looking up. So the pupil is going to be very, very, very hard to get just the dot there. Boom. All right. Those are some eyes. Loving it. All right. So, what have we got left? Really? I think it's just his glasses, and then seeing how he looks on the base, and do we want to do anything else to the base? All right, for the next step here, we need to fix the frame on his glasses, as this ended up being 2 parts due to the clog. If you do remember, this was 2 parts, and the entire top half of his head I'd had to print separately. That caused the glasses frame to not completely match here. So what I'm going to grab is some Epoxie Sculpt. This is 2-part, and if you don't have this, absolutely you need to get some. It is as important as the Liquitex modeling paste for doing any patches, fixes, and that type of thing. Sometimes, depending on just the batch that I get, there are always 2 different colors. One time it was white and gray, this time it's kind of tan and gray. Doesn't matter, you just need a little pinch in this case, a very small pinch, because we just need to do his glasses there, or not even his entire glasses, just that little bit, and even this is going to be too much. I've just grabbed a little tiny dot off of each. And I'm going to basically squish them together, get them to mix up. You will feel it warm up just a little bit in your hands. Not terribly. It's just basically mildly warmer than your skin temperature. And that lets you know that, yep, it's starting to get to go. So now that it's all one, I've taken just a small bit of this. Roll it out like you probably used to do with Play-Doh when you were a kid. And I'm going to try and match it to the size of the rest of the frame. And just kind of squish it in place. Alright, so there we go. I think that's just about dandy. Go ahead and feel out the curve there a little bit. Make sure it's not drooping too much. Okay. In 24 hours, that will be cured solid. I'm not going to wait 24 hours. I'm going to start working on it right now. But just so you know, in 24 hours it'll cure solid. I am going to go ahead and start painting it. I want his Helen rimmed glasses to be mostly black, maybe just a little bit brown. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that over here. That might be off camera, but it's alright. It's just a little bit of black in acrylic and a little bit of the dark brown in acrylic. There's not a whole lot here, so I'm just going to go ahead and mix those up. I'm going to give them a nice chocolate brown. And now that I see this, this is definitely too large of a brush for this, but I'll just get it started now that I have. One thing I want to point out is I don't want a hard edge in here. I do want this kind of to be feathering in. And that's because this hair is going to be covering over parts of it. Get a little bit better feel of that here, where it feels like more of his gray hair is flipped over the glasses there. I like that. Alright, now let's take a small brush. Get a little more of these details here. One more tip, do remember to look at your model from all angles, because sooner or later someone will. And I noticed that looking at it from down below, there were a couple of spots on the undersides of his glasses that I hadn't hit. So now that I've got those, I believe that we are to the base point of saying that this model could be complete. We obviously have to spray them down with matte enamel, get them mounted finally onto the base there. But for extra credit points, any of you that want to follow along, I have printed out and have a model linked in the description below for eyeglass lenses that I have taken the liberty from David Eastman's model and modeled out lenses that I'm hoping are going to fit in here. I've not tested it out yet. Got one that's very close and I've sanded it down a little bit, but I do need to wait the 24 hours for that to finally solidify before I try and put these in. But basically you can print these out. I printed them out in clear resin. I imagine that if you have clear PLA that, or translucent even, that it would probably do just the same. I will say scale it down just a little bit and maybe even do a couple of scale options just to see. They're small, they'll take no time at all. I've modeled these out 1-to-1 for the model here, and I'm seeing they're just a little too big still. So you may want to try 95% scaling or somewhere around there, and just kind of fluctuate. The thing I would suggest is if they're a little too small, that's okay. It's better than being a little too big, because then you have to sand down the edges to try and get it to fit. That is what I'm going to be doing here, and after that then I'll be basically just gluing them in place with some super glue, and we'll be calling that done. For now, I'm going to take him over, spray some matte enamel, and call this phase 1 complete. So what I found is my model wasn't completely perfect, no surprise, on the glasses, but pretty good. So what I've done is I am at this point just taking my side cutters or edge clippers or whatever you want to call them, angle cutters, and just clipping a little bit off of some of these corners. Otherwise, pretty okay. So I think what I'm going to do is just sand this down a little bit more. There we go. Yep, just had a rough edge. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got this oriented right again. Nope. Backwards. Okay. One thing I did not show was off screen or off camera. I took each of these and sanded them down with 800 grit sandpaper and then 1500 wet dry, and literally just spit on it a little bit to give it some wetness, and then took the disc and rubbed it around on the sandpaper, and that's got a it's still not completely clear, like you could not read a newspaper through it, but you can certainly see the colors through it, so we know that this is glass and not just an empty shell like an actor wearing frames. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and grab my little bit of activator just in case I need it. I'm hoping I don't. And some super glue, which I will need. I'm going to take our first piece and hopefully gently, I'll emphasize the word gently to myself and to you, squeeze this into place. And then just take a dot of super glue. That looks much better. So let's go ahead and do that for the second lens and call this done. That right there. That right there. Little dot. And now we're talking the extra credit win, Commissioner James Gordon with glasses. Now, we're going to go ahead and mount this guy and be done with him. Well, usually I would use 5-minute epoxy, but I don't think I'm going to bother. I'm just going to go super glue and a little bit of this extra Apoxie Sculpt that I just happen to have sitting around that had not hardened up yet. And there we go. Commissioner James Gordon, Gotham's finest, with his daughter happily behind him, watching over the whole time. Thank you, Barbara. And there you have it, folks. Jim, aka David Eastman's Commissioner Gordon, printed in Silk Silver PLA, but not that you can really tell, except for the base, which is his revolver, 357 as is shown on the slugs, and also in stamped GCPD for Gotham's finest. I hope, as always, that you followed along, maybe learned a few tricks. Who would have thought that this guy was literally had his head cut in half, right? Certainly I was a little surprised that this came out as well as it did for looking as gnarly as it did at the beginning, but again, just you need a little time and persistence and perseverance, and hey, we had a lot of that. So again, I hope you had fun, hope you followed along, and as always, enjoy, and give a shout out, let us know how you did with yours. Thanks, and until next time.